We said it, man. Just seeing Devin Booker and Bradley Beal ride away in Phoenix has been really frustrating. We know Kevin Durant ultimately made that move to the Rockets, and I think for good reason. He's always been that type of guy to kind of up and leave if things get messy. And I think DBook and Bradley Beal are sort of the opposite of that. If you remember, Brad with Washington was always very loyal. He's always kind of been a loyal player and very solid on that side. And then DBook has never switched jerseys. So I think those two guys are in a certain situation that disallows for the NBA to really see their talent at the highest level, that being in the playoffs. Dallas Mavericks versus the San Antonio Spurs, Dylan Harper on the other side versus Cooper Flag, and hey, it lived up to the billing. I think those two guys going 1 and 2, kind of jawing at each other. Cooper had 30 points, man. 10 to 21 for the field, was doing everything out there trying to catch bodies. For me, what I'm most impressed with is his ability to handle pressure. I think when I was kind of under the assumption that if you pressed him and picked him up 94 feet, that he wouldn't be able to really get it done. But he's kind of proven that wrong. Obviously, he's not doing that against higher level defenders just yet, but he's showing Mavericks that he is going to be able to initiate the offense. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy ZD over here at 3-Man Weave. I am your lovely co-host with the other lovely co-host, CJ, who's in the building. CJ, how you doing today, man? You repping the Thunder as always, man. When it rains, sometimes the thunder. You feel me?
Yes,
Come on.
sir. Yeah, I'm doing great, bro. We just chopped it up a little bit before we started as usual, just kind of, talking about the
Yep.
season and talking about these teams, bro. I'm ready for the podcast, but ready for the basketball season, bro. It just ended, like you said, 3 weeks ago, but it can't come any sooner. But this is what makes you appreciate everything in the season, playoffs, hopefully your team winning a chip like I was able to experience, but just appreciate the process, so I'm ready, man, ready to chop it up with you about some hoops.
Yeah. We got a lot of stuff on the docket, and we talk about DBook. We'll go through talk about Kobe Altman. We'll talk about Summer League. We got Detroit Pistons offseason files, but I'll give you a chance to highlight that a little bit, man. Kind of J Dub's journey on his torn ligament. I think we didn't talk about it that much, but I got a chance to dive deeper, bro. And I apologize to you. I didn't realize how big of a situation that was. I don't have it in the audience. But I wanted to bring that up to you and ask you a few questions about that, because kind of that happened 3 weeks ago. He had that performance in the finals, obviously dropping 40 points. Shea ended up winning that MVP, but I would argue J Dub, now that Halliburton went down in Game 7, he was probably the second man up. So, what are your thoughts about that? Pushing through kind of the tail half of the season and the entire playoffs with a torn ligament in his wrist.
Man, yeah, we actually didn't bring this up, surprisingly enough. Crazy that,
Not a Yeah,
yeah, but
not enough.
yeah, not enough, but I talked to you a little bit about it before. I just kind of told you how that 40 piece that he dropped in the finals, bro, just means a lot more to me now. Just seeing, like, I watched his vlog that he did, and
I watched that too, bro.
it was fire,
That's what I
right?
watched.
It's crazy, bro, because it's cool that a lot of NBA players are doing that nowadays, kind of giving us like a behind the scenes inside look of what their season is. Obviously, not posting it as it's going on because you don't want media to do this or do that. So he posted it afterwards, but he was getting a shot before every single start of the game, and this, I think he got injured in May, I believe, or April, something like that. So like the last 2 months of, yeah, April 9th. It was against the Suns, funny enough. We were talking about them before we started.
3 months, bro.
3 months with
Yeah.
a torn ligament. Obviously we played until the end of the season, so it was something he had to deal with. And I kind of talked to you about it briefly, kind of the inconsistency in his jump shot. Kind of, that is the reason. We both saw, I think the whole world saw kind of what he was able to do throughout the whole season, and just kind of seeing his jump shot become a little more inconsistent. Now we understand why. It's
Right.
something that we don't need to know all these injuries and stuff. And I'm kind of glad they were able to keep it on hush. And he J Dub was even saying that he wasn't even going to say anything, and then Presti brought it up in their press conference. So and that's kind of how word got out. So I think it kind of goes to show kind of how, like, in wraps. They have a lot of things, which is great because you don't want that type of information to leak out, and players are going to try to start hitting his wrist and messing him up even more than what he is. So, dude, it just speaks volume to the type of player he is. I'm glad that we were able to lock him up until 2030, and the fact that we were able to keep that core intact for the foreseeable future just means so much to me, especially after seeing everything he's gone through. And thankfully, he should be able to play by the beginning of this upcoming season. And I was looking at like kind of the side effects of playing through that, and he might get arthritis eventually, but that's later on. And of course, like not even making that seem like it's nothing, because obviously it's something that affects your life. But the fact that he was willing to fight through that injury, fight through the pain, and kind of achieve what every NBA player is trying to achieve at such a young age, it just kind of speaks volume for me. Like he's a legend. He'll forever be a Thunder legend in my book, and even NBA history. After seeing that performance,
I I am of the belief. He spoke about the Nuggets series like pretty specifically, but just like what he was like, for him to put up the types of performances that he had throughout the playoffs with that type of injury, you're not gonna see people do that. Um, Man, and for him to share it, I like how you touched on like kind of the impact that it had, the injury, but you brought it up earlier, you just for him to share that publicly, I think, speaks volume of his character as well. Just not even the type of basketball player that he is, but the type of person. And I think that goes a lot deeper than, what's between the lines, and a lot of people don't get that insight. And so I think it was really dope to see that, bro. And kind of obviously we've been talking about the Thunder at length. Obviously they just won a championship, but spinning right back into going into next year, bro. Like I'm excited for this because I think we're gonna have a different type of season. I think people are gonna be competing at a different type of level, and people hear stories like this. You brought it up. Players will try to hit your wrist if you're hurt, but they know that J Dub was hurt now.
yeah.
You don't think that pisses them off, bro?
Oh, that
You don't
that's
think
got
you know
to.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, bro. Like that's gonna light a fire under your ass. Like, hey, if he could do that, like, why aren't we?
Right.
Why aren't we going? So I think that just takes it to a whole nother competitive level. And Shea spoke about him very highly, and everybody in the Thunder organization speaks about J-Dub highly. And I think, like you said, bro, it just speaks volumes about him. So shout out J-Dub, man.
Shout out J Dub, bro.
Like I said, we didn't really touch on it like too much as we should have, but I seen your post today because I think he just got surgery, so that's why I
Yeah.
brought it up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he had
yeah,
like a scar with his where he got the surgery and stuff, and yeah, it's crazy, bro. Like I said, it definitely didn't talk about it enough last time, but I don't like to be the Thunder glazer, you know what I mean? But I love the Thunder. I appreciate every single one of those players, and the fact that he was able to do that, bro. Yeah, I had to post that on my story, bro, because he's a legend in my eyes, and I'm
no,
assuming in everyone else's eyes after seeing what he was able to do this whole playoff run. So shout out to J
yeah.
Dub, bro. We speak highly, or we speak a lot about the Thunder because obviously I'm a Thunder fan, but we definitely got to bring that up for sure.
And I don't want to put too much pressure on them, but like, man, that's they're on their way to the Hall. They're trying their best.
Yeah.
Well, 4 or 5 years of this type of consistency, anything can happen. So shout out J Dub and the Thunder, man. Let's stay out west though. Talk about DBook for a second. We talked about it a little bit. Obviously, him signing that extension. The numbers interesting. I brought it up before we started recording too, but Matt Ishbia has always done a good job of one thing, and that's opening his checkbook. I told CJ he's never swayed away from that. And I respect that, even if it's for better or for worse. We know what we're getting with Matt Ishbia. Clearly, he signaled to Devin Booker that he is the franchise player. For people who don't know, he holds every single record that the Suns have
Yeah.
for points, 3-pointers, anything good, scoring wise. That is, Devin Booker holds the record for them. So I think it kind of signals to the franchise, right, and to every other player on that roster how important Devin Booker is moving forward. But, bro, we said it, man. Just seeing Devin Booker and Bradley Beal rot away in Phoenix has been really frustrating. We know Kevin Durant ultimately made that move to the Rockets, and I think for good reason. He's always been that type of guy to kind of up and leave if things get messy. And I think DBook and Bradley Beal are sort of the opposite of that. If you remember, Brad with Washington was always very loyal. He's always kind of been a loyal player and very solid on that side. And then DBook has never switched jerseys. So I think those two guys are in a certain situation that this allows for the NBA to really see their talent at the highest level, that being in the playoffs. We'll have to see who they put, you know, the certain pieces that they're able to put around those guys, like a Kamal Malawak. We got Ryan, we got Grayson Allen. Like, we got a couple interesting players on the Suns that'll make it a worthwhile season, but I think they're far, far away from contention. And while I do like this move for D Book, it does concern me just from a longevity perspective. I wonder if he's ever gonna get to that mountaintop again. It's that meme, and we've seen it a lot. But he said, "Damn."
Yeah. Yeah,
That's all he said.
that's
And
all he said, man.
yeah, he knew in that moment, like, this is not something that might ever happen again.
Hmm.
For being honest, and I wasn't able to win there. It's kind of like, man, this is a tough situation to be in. But bro, 25 or more for the last 6 seasons, I think. Just unbelievable consistency. He's been the entire Phoenix heartbeat. Really, in my opinion, he's starting, and this is for my life. I'm only 24 years old, but whenever I think of the Phoenix Suns, it's not Charles Barkley, it's Devin Booker.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes to show you, how big of a deal he is. So shout out D Book. I'm glad he got paid. I think the Suns need to do a better job of putting the pieces around him to succeed. But Matt Ishbia is willing to spend. I think once they are, and this is in 6 years, 7 years, but once they get control of their draft picks again and actually have the cap restrictions taken off, I think they'll be able to make much better and more informed decisions. But as of right now, they can't add too much to their roster just because they are in the second apron.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No.
Jalen Green's an expensive contract. Like, he helped with the money for the trade, but not for their books.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you said, bro. Just he Devin Booker is the Phoenix Suns for a lot of people. I'm a little bit older than you, not by much, but I think of like you said, Charles Barkley, Steve Nash's, but Devin Booker is obviously the record holder for points, 3-pointers made. All these accolades. He is the Phoenix Sun. A lot of people will probably think about the first player that comes to mind when you think of the Suns, especially younger generation, 20s right now, early 20s, whatever it may be, kind of seen what Devin Booker has became. Just like you said, it's dope. I hope he, we don't see it a lot, but I hope he is going to be a for lifer for them. It's something that this league we haven't, besides Curry and Giannis and Jokic right now, like, there's not that many people that stay with the same team, and rightfully so. Like, you kind of have the freedom to be able to go to wherever you want, like the Kevin Durant's and whatnot. But it's dope seeing someone just be on one team. And regardless of what happens, I might, come back on my word later on in life or wherever the Suns are. And, next year we'll see. But,
Right.
it's one of those things where it's like, man, I do want him to stay there because at this point, you've made it to the finals. Of course, you want to make it back, but that's not how it works. The West is a lot tougher than it was when you were able to make it to the finals, and that team y'all had was really good. But, as of right now, like you said, they're not really in the playoff contention. So, it's going to suck not being able to see him on the biggest stage, but, he is going to be a Sun for the next 2 years, and hopefully they could make something happen. Like you said, Matt Ishbia isn't scared to open up that checkbook, so hopefully they're able to get some other people. But we'll see, man. It's gonna be interesting, man. I'm glad he signed that extension. I know we talked about it in previous podcasts. Like, if they need to, they could trade him and get a king's ransom for him. But the fact that they were sticking with him just shows that they're loyal to him and he's loyal to them as well. So I'm excited to see what he can do, but obviously the team, like you said, isn't in the best situation, but I like for lifers. We grew up with a lot of those, and I feel like we were blessed to be able to see those type of players, just, the Kobe's, Dirks, the Duncans, we haven't, like I said, I named a couple earlier, but, it's very, very few, and, You know,
Super rare.
a lot of those people won chips, and sadly, it sucks to say, but as of right now, it doesn't seem like Devin Booker is going to be one of those guys. But he's great. He's one of the best scorers we've seen of this generation. So yeah, no, it's great, man. As of right now, he's a Phoenix Sun for the next 2 years. So we'll see what
Yeah,
that turns into.
yeah, and if they ever want to move him, they can. That money is not too big, and that contract's much smaller than the one he was previously on.
Right.
So the number for the year is a lot. Obviously, competing with Shea's annual, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just it's shout out Devin Booker, man. He's definitely deserving for sure. But hey, man, we're heading out east for a second. Kobe Altman re-signed. For people who don't know who Kobe Altman is, he's president of basketball operations for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, he's the architect, man. He's kind of who's building that what's in Cleveland right now. We spoke about Cleveland on our offseason files, but they re-signed Kobe Altman to a deal, I think, through 2029, 2030. So we should see his strategic moves at the helm for the next couple of years going forward. And kind of like we've been saying all podcasts, but I think this kind of signals that they're sticking with their guys. The Cavs are in a limbo situation, right? We've spoken about their cap situation. They got a heavy balance sheet. We spoke about the Donovan Mitchell thing as well, and kind of my thoughts surrounding that. How they could potentially trade him if things don't end up working out there, which I could see, especially in the foreseeable future. But the person behind those moves is Kobe, and kind of the person that's been able to build this is obviously Kenny implementing the strategies on the court, but there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and so they do GM awards, right? Sam Presti's definitely won some, but I think people definitely kind of sweep that under the radar. The importance of basketball operations, and Kobe Altman's doing it at the highest level. I know me and CJ we look a little bit deeper than what's going on the court, but if you don't know who that is, he's the man who's making all the decisions over there, and this kind of signals that Cleveland is behind everything that he's doing, even if it hasn't turned into a championship. Obviously, they have not won since LeBron James has departed. But Donovan Mitchell had a recent exit interview, and I think he brought this up too. But he said, I want to do it a different way. I'm not LeBron. This isn't his team. We have different players on this roster. We're trying to do it our own way, and I think signing Kobe Altman through this extension kind of signifies that. And I'm excited to see what can become of the Cavs, bro. We spoke about Mobley, talked about Garland, and obviously D Mitchell, but even their other guys, bro. We're gonna see kind of what they can get from the bench. Lonzo Ball, obviously their new acquisition too. We can see what he's gonna do coming off those injuries that he's had, but they're in a prime spot to return, to a high place in the East just because of what's happened with the Pacers and Celtics. And so, yeah, man, I want to say Cleveland's going to be a top 3 team in the East. If they can have that, build on that continuity, keep their players healthy. I think Kenny Atkinson, Coach of the Year last year as well. I mean, my goodness, what more could you want? I think they're setting up for the future.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like you said it, bro. Just, being able to extend someone that has constructed your whole roster, it speaks volume to the
Yeah.
organization. They like you said, they haven't been successful since, or they haven't won a chip since LeBron left, but they've slowly each year have gotten better. When they got Donovan Mitchell, I feel like that was a huge splash for them, and then just kind of what they've been able to build on top of that. Drafting Mobley, getting Jared Allen in that trade. It's just all the pieces are slowly coming together, and I think last season was a great example of being able to see what that roster would do when they're healthy. Obviously injuries in the playoffs kind of derailed their season a little bit earlier than expected, but I think what they were able to build on, like you said, going into this next year, pretty much extending everybody. Someone that constructed the roster. They have Kenny Atkinson for another couple years, and then their whole roster, their whole starters are pretty much all there. Besides, Ty Jerome, and certain players, but they were pretty much able to get everyone else. So I think they're tooling up, or not even retooling, just bringing the team back and coming into this next season. I wouldn't be surprised if they're like you said, a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, maybe even the best, to be honest. Because
Yeah.
as of right now,
I mean, I'm gonna go with the Knicks. I'm gonna see if my answer changes over these next couple months when we do our predictions, but I got to go with Brunson, man, and Cat. And I know Mike Brown, we haven't really talked about that too much. We'll have to see what that becomes. Obviously, having that new head coach is a big deal. And Cleveland has that continuity over the Knicks right now for sure. But we'll have to see, bro. That's
Yeah,
going to be,
it's gonna be
early Eastern Conference Finals,
yeah, it's gonna be
bro. That'll
interesting for
be,
sure. I'm
yeah, we're going
excited.
to have to see. But yeah, man, you been watching any Summer League games?
Honestly, bro, no, not as much. I'll see highlights. Like you said, the center that got drafted, Zhang
Yeah, yeah, Young Hansen.
Young Hansen, that's who it is. Yeah, I was able to see a couple of highlights. I see, on Twitter there'll be like a highlight post, but I haven't sat down and watched a full game or anything. It's been, like you said, whenever the top guys aren't playing, it's kind of hard to watch those games. But I'm able to watch the highlights and see some good plays from certain players. But as of sitting down watching the whole one, no, I can't say I have been.
Yeah, I watch sparingly. I try to watch quarters here and there and just see who's on the court. Cooper Flag, man, capture the flag, as you like to say. Showing out in Battle of Texas, we had a recent matchup: Dallas Mavericks versus the San Antonio Spurs. Dylan Harper on the other side versus Cooper Flag, and hey, it lived up to the billing. I think those two guys going 1 and 2, kind of jawing at each other. Cooper had 30 points, man. 10 to 21 for the field, was doing everything out there, trying to catch bodies. For me, what I'm most impressed with is his ability to handle pressure. I think when I was kind of under the assumption that if you pressed him and picked him up 94 feet, that he wouldn't be able to really get it done. But he's kind of proven that wrong. Obviously, he's not doing that against higher level defenders just yet, but he's showing Mavericks that he is going to be able to initiate the offense. And so I think that kind of shows you the type of player that he is. And then going over to Dylan Harper, bro, had a nice and one finish, had a nice block as well, just getting people involved. And the Spurs ended up taking that game. It wasn't like Cooper Flag dominated enough to get the Mavericks to win. I think he was really the only one who was doing anything else out there. But the Spurs got Carter Bryant. They got a couple other pieces that are interesting. But yeah, I think this signaled to the Mavericks, bro, that they had to shut Cooper Flag down. Um, it's a shame. Obviously, from a fan perspective, that's kind of the only opportunity. It is the only opportunity that we get to see him for right now. And obviously, the Mavericks don't want him to get hurt. They don't want a situation that their number one pick can't play from day one. I understand that even as a fan, but just seeing him go out there, bro, try to catch bodies again, like, hey, he tries to dunk on people that I know they'd be like, hey, don't hurt yourself, man. But seeing him get to his spots, hit middies, step out to the three, very polished player. I think people were talking down on him after he was only able to muster 10 points in his first appearance, but that was against my Lakers too, so
It was, yeah, sure it
you know.
was, yeah.
But yeah, he's just been proven any doubter wrong and proven everybody who messes with him right. So I think the Mavericks understand that it's bigger than basketball at this point. You got to kind of save your assets, and he's a valuable asset at that. But yeah, bro, super great game going on between the Spurs and the Mavs. I was able to watch a little bit of that just because it was number one versus number two, and yeah, bro, Dylan Harper definitely did his thing. Cooper Flag's just a generational player, so it's I would say that he's gonna, like you said, he's got some things to prove. He's not a Wemby necessarily, but man, he's gonna be good from day one for sure, and definitely one of the better players that we've seen over the recent years. So shout out to Cooper Flag. It's unfortunate that he got shut down, but yeah, for sure, it was definitely a good matchup to watch if you were able to catch any of that game. But
Yeah.
yeah, I seen Jeremiah Fears as well. It looked really good. Going to the Pelicans a little bit. They were competing against my Lakers. LA ended up getting it done. But bro, I was shocked that Jeremiah Fears was able to penetrate the paint like he was doing. Derek Queen was in the mix. I think the Pelicans, they started to get going at the end of the game. Those two players specifically, but I had some questions about them as well, and I think seeing how polished they are and how they'll be able to contribute from day one, I wouldn't be shocked if you see Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears get shut down just because they're very good too. I think
Mm-hmm.
they're better than the summer league guys out there. But
Right.
some other dudes who are doing well, we got Nikkei Clifford from Sacramento, Drew Timme, obviously Brooklyn Nets. He's kind of a second year dude, but he's showing out for sure. We had Reed Shepard doing his thing. You know, you saw a little bit. He's kind of on blast. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets shut down too. Just he's been cooking, hitting threes left and right. Um, Hornets, bro, conking up Liam McNeely, man. Uh, I say White Chocolate Thunder. White Chocolate Thunder just hitting threes. The Hornets are for sure dangerous as well. So there's been a couple interesting games that we've had going on, but this last dude, man, is definitely a standout to me as well. Young Hansen, man. I was able to watch a little bit, and I'm gonna be honest, man. I did not have any background information on this player, but I'm shocked. I'm shocked. I think his fluidity is what shocks me. It kind of reminds me of a Wembanyama, just because I think when you're that size, it's very hard to move. He's way more fluid than Yao Ming, and Yao Ming is a way more dangerous player, obviously in his career. But I think Young Hansen has a chance to be pretty good player in the NBA, especially if he gets a consistent three ball. I would say, passing and definitely his defensive attributes are his best qualities right now. But if he can figure out a way to polish up his mid range game, his post game, and then step out and hit a three every once in a while, like, man, the Blazers got something cooking. You had asked me a great question before the podcast had started, but I think the Blazers starting five going to look a little something with like Scoot. You're going to roll out Shaden Sharp, you're gonna put Jerami Grant, got Kamara and Klingon. I think Jan Hansen gonna come off the bench. I think Drew Holiday's coming off the bench. You know, Rob Will. So I think the Blazers have some hope moving forward. They know the pieces that they're building around, and obviously Scoot's at the forefront of that with Shaden Sharp. But adding Young Hansen to the mix doesn't seem like too bad of an idea. And I know he was kind of the shock of the first round, and he's also proven me wrong a little bit in a sense of like just his polished skill. I didn't realize that he had that in him. And I think moving forward, that's something that Billups is going to look to exploit, especially his size too, man, being at 7'2" or whatever, 7'3". It's just unreal. So shout out Young Hansen. We got a lot of different teams, man. It's tough to keep up with Summer League. But it's been good. You know, like you said, the quality of basketball is lacking at times for sure. But ultimately, seeing those guys compete at a high level is definitely good to me. So I'm glad I've been able to pick up some games here and there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely need to
Yeah.
tap in a little bit more, bro, because I'm able to watch a couple games. Like I said, I saw, like you brought him up earlier, Carter Bryant, just what he was able to do defensively. You know, he's not gonna.
Drop the Cooper flag.
That's what I'm saying, bro. Just I think that was kind of the type of player that he was in college. You know, he could score, but I think that was kind of what we were talking about whenever we're doing like our draft recap. Just for these players that are entering the league, they kind of need to find out what they're focusing on and what they need to do to get on the court. And I think with Carter Bryant, it's his defensive ability. Just kind of like you said, he was able to kind of lock up Cooper Flag and his versatility. You know, it seemed like he was getting over the screens, pressuring the ball, making him pick up his dribbles. So I think that's, if they could focus on that, have him be like their defensive stopper on that side of the ball, he's definitely going to get a lot of run. You know, he may not be averaging 12 points or whatever it is, but if he comes in, gets a couple layups, gets a dunk, maybe hit a jump shot or two, that's all you really need from a player of his level. Just kind of what he's able to provide. And it seems like I think they were up by like 30 at one point or whatever, and you could still see he was like intense on the bench. It just kind of shows his character and the type of person he's going to be for the Spurs. So shout out to the Spurs, bro. They do it again. Get
Yeah. They keep getting better every year, which is a good sign.
It's a good sign. It's a good sign.
Yeah, Topic has been cooking too.
Yeah.
I think he's real good. You've talked about him though at length, so I'm glad we've ran through a little bit of summer league. If you guys get a chance, if you're watching the pod, definitely tap in a little bit at least. Watch a player you like in the draft. Pick one and then watch that guy. But hey, you ready to talk about the Detroit Pistons going to these offseason files, man?
Oh yeah, I'm ready, bro. Let's get into it.
I think this is going to be a good one for sure. Detroit is in a great situation. You said it. You texted me, man. The Detroit
basketball.
There you go, man. But yeah, man, they're in a good spot. Healthy balance sheet. Really no concerns from CJ and I. It's not going to be the most interesting. I would argue. Well, let me ask you this question, CJ. You like whenever we go through second apron teams, or you like the ones with clean balance sheets?
I'm not gonna lie to you, bro. I like the second apron teams because
Me
it
too.
makes us think a little bit more. You know, like when you have a clean balance sheet, there's not much for us to really talk about on that
Talk
side.
about
It's more so us talking about the players, maybe improvements they could have throughout the whole
right.
season.
Yeah.
But when it's like the balance sheet, like that's numbers, so we could literally look at it and like, okay, well, this contract's looking pretty bad. They should probably move him, or this player is on a low contract. You probably need to extend him. So I like the second apron teams. But it's also interesting talking about the teams that are in good standing because at this point it's just you're good on that side of the game that like doesn't really get talked about. Now it's kind of improving on the on court performances. So and that's not hard to talk about, but it's a little more predicting and guessing what can happen for them to be
Nuance.
better. Yeah, exactly. For nuance. Yeah, exactly.
And stick around because I got a trivia question for your boy CJ at the end. It's kind of a little cherry on top. So yeah, stick around. We'll go through the Detroit Pistons offseason files. We'll get right into it. The way we do it on this show is we go through all 30 teams, of course, but we start off with 3 franchise players that we know that they're building around for the season. It's kind of a list that CJ and I compile, and we believe that the Pistons are moving forward with. So starting off with the gem, man, it's none other than Cade Cunningham. He doesn't need an introduction at this point. The savior of Detroit. Last season had a coming out party, though. I know CJ and I have spoken highly of Cade throughout his career, but he has that 5-year, what is it, 270 now
Mm-hmm.
because of the All NBA escalator. So Cunningham is clearly seen as the number one franchise player going forward. They have added every single piece on this roster to fit his timeline, and I think that speaks to the type of player that he is, coming off the best season of his career, right, CJ? I think Cade Cunningham doubters are real quiet right now.
Oh,
The
100%.
6'6", 6'7" guard. You probably didn't expect him to be a Luka, right? Who was Cade Cunningham going to be? And he's turning into a 25 and 10 guy with 6 or 7 rebounds and flirting with triple doubles nightly. And yeah, that's a pretty scary player. Top 25 player in the NBA, very young, 23 years old, and yeah, I think all the moves that they've made. I know they tried to get didn't end up working out, but even hiring him, it was a move to bring in a veteran voice and a leader. Now that they have that, with Bickerstaff as well, I think Monty Williams was that voice was trying to be that voice for Cade. Bickerstaff has completely changed that. I think now that he's kind of in taken over the reins and been at the helm for the last 2 years, I think he's changed everything for that team, and it starts with Cade and what he can provide for the offense, and then everybody else around him just fills the role, right?
Mm-hmm.
Either that's being a shooter, being athletic, being the big man, running the rim, because they know Cade's gonna find you. So shout out to Cade Cunningham, recently made an All-Star team, All NBA third team, and he's also on our All Playoff team as well. So he had a
He sure
great
was.
year, just completely killed the entire season, man. So shout out to him. I'm excited to see what he can do for them moving forward. But this is clearly the number one player,
Mm-hmm.
unless you have somebody else.
Oh no, absolutely not. Come on now. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, man. But this next guy is a little bit up for debate. Detroit faithful, you can put it in the comments if you think this is a player that they can build around for sure going forward. But it's none other than Asar Thompson, the two-way wing with potential star, with star potential. Um, People could say it's Jaden Ivey. Now, the reason I didn't put him on this list, we didn't put him on this list, is because Jaden Ivey was hurt last season. He wasn't able to really show us, even though he had that great start to the year, what he was capable of. But Asar Thompson, man, being on a team-friendly deal, I think he's on year 2 of his 4-year, $34 million rookie deal. He brings elite defensive versatility, rebounding, and continues to be working on that jump shot. For me, that's his biggest thing is getting that jump shot. So whenever Cade does spray him the ball in the corner, he can knock down an open three. But I would argue, no argue, he is the best defensive player on that team, just in terms of his athleticism, what he can do, and he goes out and he guards the best player on the opposing team, every single night. And I think that's a really big deal for whenever you're trying to have these championship teams, right? I think the the Pistons are trying to model the Thunder in a sense. Just from their defensive prowess, having shooters around, and having a point guard who's very heliocentric in a sense that like he gets everything done, right? Shea is very similar in scoring, passing. Shea had games. I think how many assists did he finish with in game? Was it 6 or 7?
Oh, like 12, I think.
Yeah, he had like 12
11 or
is
12,
something.
something like
But,
that. Yeah.
but I was like, man, this dude is a great passer too.
Mhm.
But like, that's my point. Is I think they have a really good model with the Thunder, and so
Mhm.
having that two-way wing, a superstar in the making, having somebody who can go out there and guard the other opposing players, best player is a lot. And I think a lot of teams would like to have Asar Thompson on their roster. And
100%.
again, moving forward, it seems to me that the Pistons have signaled to us that he's going to be one of the main pieces this championship, I guess, chase, you could say. They still, haven't been able to bring it to Detroit in a long time since, I think, I forget the year, but I know Billups, Rasheed Wallace, obviously Tayshaun Prince, right? Like that Detroit team was one of the best teams ever. And so I think they got a lot of culture there. But shout out to Star Thompson, bro. Two-way superstar, had a really breakout season last year defensively, and he's just got to work on his offense, continue to grow his offensive game. But another great piece to have alongside Cade Cunningham. But his last guy is a no-brainer. It's none other than Jalen Duren, a modern big man, a paint presence. He is also on another team-friendly deal, only $18 million. I think he's on year 3 of his 4-year, $18 million deal. I think there's a team option for years 3 and 4. And Duren's already a double double machine. I spoke to CJ about this, but he is in a peculiar situation because of Detroit and how they've built their team. He doesn't actually need to be able to shoot the ball, which I think can hurt him. I think he should always work on his outside shot. It would not hurt if Jalen Duren could add a 3-point shot, but his rebounding, his athleticism, more importantly, his rim running, I think he adds spacing to the floor, being in that dunker spot, coming off a pick and roll, being a threat to catch a lob or score an easy layup. And I think he is the perfect running mate for Cade Cunningham. I don't think they need anybody else. He's a young, athletic guy who can play heavy minutes. He's shown that he can contribute in the playoffs. My goodness, I mean, doing that against the Eastern Conference Finals team in the Knicks, it kind of goes to show you how dangerous Jalen Duren can be. Obviously, Cat is a semi slouch defensively. It's not to say that he's going to lock you down, but he is viewed as a key offensive player for Detroit, and I think he's somebody who can anchor those pick and rolls, and while continuing to expand his offensive bag. And I love the way Jalen Duren plays, man. For this one and done, people probably didn't expect him to grow as quickly as he has, but now that he is still very young and at this capability, it's exciting because I know Detroit can open up the floor, putting shooters and putting guys in the right spots to succeed. So they got Tobias Harris still. They added Duncan Robinson with that, but yeah, man, those are three-man weaves, three main players that we feel like Detroit is building around. I touched on it earlier. You could add Jaden Ivey if you want, but for us, we just need to see more. I think this next season is going to show us a lot about how the Pistons are moving forward in terms of who they're building around. So that's exciting. Would you like to dive into their cap situation though, since it'll be a quick one?
Of course. Yeah, yeah. So, kind of going into it, our next segment that we do for the offseason files is going to be their cap space or salary cap for what said team. And this episode is going to be Detroit Pistons. So, they're at a $145 million payroll right now. They're well under the tax line. For everyone that doesn't know, the tax line is 177 million. So they have 25 to 30 million dollars flexible due to rookie contracts plus expiring deals. Like ZD was saying, Jalen Duren, even Jaden Ivey, they're all on rookie contracts still. So they have a super young team. They just extended Cade, so that's pretty much a bulk of their contract situation. But like you said earlier, Tobias Harris, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent next year. And just a lot of rookie deals, like we brought up. They have Ron Holland still. They have Marcus Sasser. They have a lot. So
Yeah,
their
wow.
cap space is it's great. It's in a
Own all
situation
their
where they're really like another, after Tobias ends up leaving next, or if he ends up leaving next year, they might extend him depending on where they're at and where they think their team is going to go. They can acquire they could splash in the offseason that year and potentially sign a huge contributing factor in a free agent. So they're good in that sense, but like we were saying earlier, don't have really much to talk about with that. Since they're not in the second apron, we don't have to really dive deep, but it's a great spot to be for the Detroit Pistons. Like you have a lot of rookies that are showing great potential. Like we were just saying with Jaden Ivey, we really missed out on a whole year with him, and they were still able to make the playoffs. So kind of goes into our next part, just some of their key offseason transactions. For everyone that doesn't know, Malik Beasley is still under investigation for gambling and betting on NBA games. We will see how that shakes out and the contractual consequence from that. Yeah, it
Cannot do
sucks.
that. Yeah,
It sucks. I think we talked about him. In previous about it briefly. We still don't know much about it, but Malik Beasley had a great year this past season. So kind of this
franchise leader in threes for a season.
crazy. You know what I mean? So it sucks seeing what happened with him because coming off that season, especially how Cade was playing, it looked like he was going to be a part of their future. But as of right now, it's up in the air. We still don't know where it's at. So kind of going to the next one. Dennis Schroeder was traded to the Kings. The Pistons received a $4.2 million trade exception and a 2026 second round pick. I think Dennis Schroeder was a great pickup for them. I know he got kind of tossed all over the place this season. I think he started the Nets and then went to the Warriors and then ended up going to the Pistons. So just kind of seeing the type of player that he was, I think that's kind of what what they were missing. So, I'm not saying that, obviously Jaden Ivey could be that, or depending on what rotations they run, he might be coming off the bench or might be starting, but I think that's kind of what they were missing. They were missing kind of that second floor general whenever Cade wasn't on the floor, and I think Dennis Schroeder
Right.
did a great job of that this past season. Kind of able to score at will at certain times, but he can get people involved and just kind of run the offense. I think him being traded obviously benefited off of how well he was doing in the season. I think it was a great trade
Right.
because he is getting a little older, and I think just kind of the culture that the Pistons are trying to set, they're trying to get these young guys, young defensive guys that could potentially be two-way superstars all over the court. It makes sense, but I think that is going to be a little bit of a hole that they're going to have to try to fill. And like I was saying,
I agree.
hopefully Jaden Ivey can fill that, but it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing, because I feel like I'm going to ask you this. Do you think he's going to be starting again with next to Cade, Jaden Ivey, or do you think he's going to be coming off the bench?
I think they're gonna let him go,
Just go? Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Because I just know
especially with no Beasley.
no
If
be
if he's not there,
yeah. So Duncan Robinson's going to be coming off the bench, or
this is what I have. I have Cade. I'll have Ivy. Their three is up in the air just because if
Asar?
Malik Beasley's there, yeah, or yeah, if you want to put a star there, you can. You can. I think they're probably gonna put him
I
there. It's
I
just
would
yeah.
just for their defense,
Who's gonna be the four? I guess.
Tobias probably.
Yeah, I have something on that. So we'll talk about that a little later. I
Okay,
don't think they should be starting Tobias Harris.
that's fair.
He is at the like. What are you getting with that? You have all
Right.
these young players who are on rookie deals. Like I think they will, but I'm also like, bruh, like,
Yeah,
don't you want
I think it's
like
just because it sucks, but I think it's just how much they're
to
paying
fill the
him.
role
Yeah, they just
and
kind.
yeah, and how much you're paying him,
Yeah,
right?
it's like why would I pay this guy so much money and just have him come off the bench? I think that's something in the NBA kind of happens a lot. If you get paid that hefty
Good point.
contract, then you're probably going to be starting just because it doesn't make sense. And, it makes sense in our eyes because we're thinking future. Why not try to develop your young guys and get them the run and stuff? But as a business, they're probably like, man, we're paying 26 million for Tobias Harris, but he's coming off the bench. So it's interesting. But
Yeah, you have to leverage that for sure. That's a great point. I did not. We'll have to see. I'm
we'll
sure
see.
Tobias will be in there, but Dennis Schroeder was the reason the Kings traded for him was because of the reasons you outlined. He's a secondary creator. He doesn't need to start, but gives you starter juice. And I think the Pistons got the pick and the $15 million. I
Yeah,
think they were excited about that. So
yeah,
I think for
100%.
them that's great.
Yeah,
Like you
great.
said, they got rid of the aging guy. Like he's good,
He's
but they
good.
don't
Yeah,
because of Ivy. Yeah, he's a little younger. They're willing to go that way.
yeah,
So
makes sense.
that's
Honestly,
exciting.
it was a great move by them. Honestly, like shout out to
Yeah,
the Pistons front office because a lot of people would have just probably kept
kept it
him and probably extended him, and then Jaden Ivey's potential probably would have been altered with. So
diminished, right?
shout out to them, you know. But going on to their next acquisition, Pistons were making moves this offseason, boys. Duncan Robinson acquired from Miami for Karis LeVert and Simone Fontecchio. Robinson is under contract for 19.4 million in 2026 with a team option for 26-27. Kind of like Z was saying earlier, with just the type of player that Cade is, you know, I think it was a great example of what Malik Beasley was able to do. I have no reason to think, you know, obviously different type players. You know what I mean? I would say Malik Beasley's a lot better defensively, but Duncan Robinson is one of the best 3-point shooters we have in this league, and I just don't think he's really been given the opportunities like he will probably be given in Detroit.
For me, in terms of on-court, I feel like they got a taste of that last season, but there's a next level to it, and I think they're working on getting to that level. And they play very fast, like you said. They play a certain style of offense. Cade likes to get up and down. He pounds the air out of the ball, which can lead to turnovers. But figuring out prioritizing their spacing right is going to be super important as they go forward in this offseason. Just getting accustomed to maybe not having Malik Beasley out there. Some guys are going to be coming off the bench, seeing what their rotations are looking like. So getting that spacing down is going to be huge. The next thing is kind of goes into the beef stew thing, but I think they can establish that defense is their identity. You know, we talk about Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren and beef stew, and I think some of those guys that they have on their roster have to hide the defensive liabilities that, you know, Cade Cunningham can be, Duncan Robinson can be, even Ron Holland could be a good defender. I think he has a longer wingspan. He's a more athletic wing, but it's crucial to lean into that identity because honestly, that's what wins championships. If we look at the most recent winner, what did they do really well? They guarded. I think obviously the Thunder are one of the best offensive teams too, so it's hard to say it's just their defense, but their defense was a really big contributing factor to why they won. The Pacers showed us too, they can hoop. Like they were playing against the best defense I've seen in the last decade. They still scored points, but I think it's the continuity. So it's the switching, understanding what spot to be in, understanding rotations. One thing the Thunder do really well is they switch onto bigs really well. The Denver series, Nikola Jokic he didn't struggle. I would say he still did really well, but there's a couple games he struggled.
Right.
I'll be honest. I think he had, you know, marks. He gets the marks on his arms whenever he's getting messed around, but I think the Pistons have the ability to be just as physical as the Thunder. That's why I'm using the Thunder as an example, and I've used them throughout this piece series. They have the size, they have the intangibles, they have the ability to lean into that defensive identity that I'm talking about. So it's like, why not do that? That's what wins championships, and to me, it's something that they could take another step forward on. So this next one, though, I think is interesting, and this kind of goes to the Tobias Harris point you made, but they got to let their youth grow, bro. If that means Tobias Harris doesn't play 35 minutes just because you're paying him $30 million, that's what you do.
Right.
And you lean into that. And, you know, it might be him specifically just because of that contract, but even just in total, right, overall scope and landscape, looking at things, Detroit is a really young team. They're one of the younger teams in the NBA. Lean into that, man. You can play guys 30, 35 minutes who are younger than 23 or 23 or younger. Like, they're going to be hungry night after night after night. And I think it's important to lean into that core. I already said it, but maybe look to move Tobias Harris out of the lineup. I don't necessarily know how you would move that around, how that would change your rotation, but make some room for Ivy, you know, make some room for him to feel like he can come in and be a contributor. And I will say Tobias Harris takes up a lot of shot output. And I think Jaden Ivey's a more important person to be leaning towards. And so that was like my last core strategy that I had for their on-court is just make sure you lean into that youth, continue to establish their defensive identity, and then prioritize spacing around Cade. I feel like prioritizing spacing around Cade's been their number one thing since they drafted him. But it's still number one thing here, and I know they have that as the number one thing on their board too. So that's kind of some on the court strategy things that they can do to improve their roster. I think the youth thing is interesting. You brought it up, but just having all those rookie deals, having all those young players, that equals leverage, bro. They just have more energy, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Going to the off the court strategies though. CJ said this earlier. Since they're capped, they're in a great space with their cap. They don't own any tax money. They're not in any bad contract situation. They have to remember that equals leverage. What I mean by that is you can use the $15 million for a trade exception that you got with Schroeder. You could use Tobias Harris in a trade if you wanted to get some lasting value, get some picks. There's a lot of things that you can do because you have that area of growth to mess with. I think it's interesting because Detroit's always been in a situation they've owned their picks. I was going to say this earlier, but because of what they were doing 6 years ago, they're now able to do what they're doing today. They were making the right decisions. It may not have always paid dividends. Again, they took Marvin Bagley. They did some things that were very interesting, but they're here. They're in a good spot. Like CJ said, the future is now for them, so they're able to make decisions, and they have that leverage because of their cap space. I think they should use it. They should be unafraid to take a little bit of risk. I think teams that have healthier balance sheets should take more risk. If I was an advisor for an NBA team, that's what I would say. If you have the ability to take the risk, we should take the risk. The NBA is a must-win league. Everybody's trying to win. So every single team is trying to make improvements to win. And so that's where it starts, I think, is using their cap space properly. And then, bro, just reframing this rebuild, just building the Detroit basketball brand up again. I think we've said this before, but since they were in some darkness for the last 5 to 6 years, they've lost a lot of fans. I think they're starting to kind of come back out of the womb. They did a really cool thing with the Caesars Superdome last year whenever they couldn't win any games. Like, they were giving out free pizzas anytime they caught a W. They took the Celtics. I don't know if you remember this, CJ, but they barely lost to the best team in the East. This was 2 years ago when they barely had any wins. Bro, it showed me, I was like, the Pistons are going to be good one day. You just wait, man. Yeah. You just wait. Now we're here. I think reframing this rebuild has been great for their brand. Me and CJ are a little older than some of our audience maybe, but for people who don't know, Detroit has a great basketball brand, and I think just trying to put that back out there into the NBA is my second thing that they have to do. They have to increase their marketing budget. They have to spend here. They're in a really good spot, and I think it's going to pay dividends in 10 years whenever the cap continues to rise and there's more marketing opportunities. But, just capitalize on all this momentum, rebuild the brand, try to reframe it that, you're here to win a championship. Over the last 6 years, Pistons fans have felt like they're tanking for no reason. They don't know why what they're doing is working. And I think this is a signal to the Pistons fans that they're finally in a working system. And the Pistons are no longer collecting young pieces. They're now building around them. With Cade on a fresh max, Asar is flashing all of his talent. Duran's doing his thing. Like, they're in a prime position to really take over the Eastern Conference. And now it's not about patience. I said this earlier, but if I was an advisor, I would definitely tell them to increase their risk a little bit and go out and try to sign a max player next season, or go out and try to make a trade that could shake up your roster, trading Tobias Harris. There's a lot of different directions the Pistons can go in, but man, to have options is the best.
Yeah.
When you have no options, you can't do anything, but they have options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're in a great spot, man. Kind of. One more thing before we wrap this up. What would you say for Detroit Pistons? What would be a successful season for them in this upcoming year? Or what's your expectations for them?
Ultimate success is you win the Eastern Conference semifinals. You go to the Eastern. Okay. Success, get to the Eastern Conference semis. Just win a round. You get a team like you improve on the last season.
Right.
Because now the Pistons are a playoff team, and I think this window, though, I'm gonna go with get to the Eastern Conference Finals. This window, no Celtics, no Pacers, really. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
This is the time. I think they'll be a top 5 or 4 seed,
Yeah.
probably.
Are they going to be a 50-win team this upcoming year?
Yeah,
Lock it in. Lock that in.
yeah.
I agree too.
No injuries, no
Yeah.
injuries.
Yeah, I was about to
Yeah,
say they're in a perfect situation, bro.
51, 52. I could see it without a doubt. And I'm not even high on the Pistons per se,
Yeah.
but they've just built a really good roster. So, um, you ready to answer the folks' trivia question for them that since they've stayed throughout this entire offseason file?
Yeah, bro, let's get it.
All right, man. So this one going back to summer league. I got a good question for CJ. CJ, who is the last number 1 pick besides Cooper Flag to score 30 points in an NBA League summer?
This is good. You know, Z gave me the ability to be able to think about this. Kind of sat on it for a little pause. And he told me, he gave me a little hint. He said it's someone that like you're not really surprised. And I don't, maybe it's just me thinking into it a little bit too much. You know, we were talking about someone that was just a number 1 pick. Is it Cade?
It is not.
Ah,
I knew I was going to get you.
you're
with
gonna
that
give
one
me
too.
with that one too, because
Yeah,
I really thought
I was like, hopefully he guesses K. It
I
is
did.
not. That's a good guess.
I thought it was there. I thought it was written on the wall. You know.
I'll give you another hint, dude.
Okay.
When this cat came out of college, though, fastest cat we seen.
Oh, number 1 pick. Recently, like within
last
like 10 years, 5
decade.
decade. Yeah. Okay.
No, now it's longer than that. I think it's last 13 years.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Little young. I think it's a little. Yeah.
Is it John Wall?
It is John Wall.
Okay, thank you. That's why I was like, because I was
it's
thinking
John Wall.
John Wall, yeah.
Yeah, good. There you go.
You said
I was
fast.
gonna say I was like I don't. Yeah, I was like I think now that he's been out of the league for the last year and a half.
Yeah, it was 2011, right? That was
11. Yeah, it was 2011. I was gonna say it's been longer than a decade now.
Mm-hmm. That's why I was like, you said fast, and I was like, okay, thinking fast.
John freaking
John
Wall,
bro.
and bro, I'm not shocked at that one bit.
No,
just
yeah,
like,
me either.
We talked about Beal, like that time period for the Wizards was so freaking cold, and we talked about them a little bit on this pod. But seeing Alex Sarr and Trey Johnson, man, it makes me excited. I wouldn't be surprised if they get shut down.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah,
so
this is probably the brightest future they've really had since John Wall and Beal, to be honest.
And I'm shocked at that, to be honest. Remember, we'll talk about Washington at the end. It'll probably be in like a month. But man, like I again, for them, like a year ago, I would think they'd still have JP.
Yep.
Maybe even I didn't even think they would trade Porzingis, but they did. Makes sense.
Did you think they would get rid of Kuzma?
No, not really, because he was doing too. He seemed like somebody that they could use, like if they got younger pieces like a Trey Johnson. I'm sure they kind of wish they had Kuzma right now.
Yeah.
But
probably.
Chris Middleton, the older vets are going to be so good for players like Trey Johnson or Sarr or Whitmore. So they're in a good spot too. But yeah, like they haven't. I would say, like you're saying, it probably hasn't been this bright since those times.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of smiling and stuff. So shout out the Wizards, bro.
Mm-hmm. It's just crazy, bro.
Trying their best.
I remember Pistons and Wizards. It was bad basketball, man. And it's looking, obviously Pistons, different situation. But the Wizards, they're what they got going on right now too with the youth movement and just kind of the players that they're getting. It's looking bright for them too. So.
I have this exercise we'll do before the season starts. Right before we'll go the 1 through 30, and I want to hear who's going to win them. And who's going to win the least. We'll just fill it in.
Okay.
You go from the bottom up, most likely, so you'll be like, who's going to suck?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
go all the way to the top. I like that. That would be a fun exercise for sure.
The little mid-tier teams, like you said, Detroit could be 50 wins. To me, they're going to be top 12, probably. But so you'll see how interesting it gets. Utah will be at the bottom, right? Unfortunately. We talk about the Jazz. They have some things that are exciting. We'll have to see what they do with Ace Bailey, too. But yeah. This is It's been good, man. You got anything else for the people?
No, no, this is a good one. Excited to see what Detroit has to offer this upcoming season. I think we did a great job of kind of explaining what their situation is and what they need to improve on the court. But
Yeah.
super excited, man. This got me like pumped up to see them play this upcoming season. I'm not gonna lie, because looking
For
looking at all
sure.
these players and looking at the potential, it's I'm ready, bro. I'm ready to see what they got going.
I'm I'm not a like Pistons fan, but I'm gonna be low key cheering for them.
Yeah, of
Like for
course.
sure, bro. East Conference is wide open. Like this is it, man. But yeah, that's gonna do it, man. It's gonna do it for the people over here at Three Man Weave. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. We appreciate every one of you guys who's been listening, and we'll catch you guys next time, man.
Peace.
Peace.
Three man, three man.
Three Man.